What's going on, everybody? My name is Tenebris Infinite, and welcome back to Generation Zero. For today, we have a hell of a challenge. So, last week, I had a lot of fun taking part in the community challenge, taking on tanks with just my Magnus, and I thought, what the heck, let's go off, face the strongest enemy in the game with the weakest gun in the game. So we've got an Apoco tank just off in the distance over there, and we're going to be bringing off the Molder PP in just its dilapidated version, and we're going to see if we can take down that Apoco tank with just the Molder. I feel like I'll be able to do this challenge, but the real question is how long it's going to take me. There have been a couple other community members that have done this challenge, and it's taken them all a very long time. So I'm not sure if my tips and tricks and strategies will really result in a faster time or not. So I guess we're just gonna have to find out here and start fighting this big boy. So this was probably the most difficult part of the challenge, isolating the tank so that way we could just focus on the individual enemy and complete this challenge as quickly as we possibly can. So there's a bunch of runners that spawn around this relay beacon, and the main focus was taking them down. But there happened to be an Apoco hunter that got thrown into the mix here, and that guy caused me more of a challenge, I'd say, than the tank even did. The Apoco hunters have this crazy mortar attack that does stupid amounts of damage. So really in the end, I knew that I had to focus on the runners, otherwise they'd just be picking me apart the entire time I was trying to take on the hunters. So I generally just kind of focused on the runners in the first place, and then started trying to go after the hunter himself. So it was at this moment that I started shitting bricks, because getting knocked down in the middle of combat is super dangerous, but luckily enough I had spaced myself out so the enemies were trying to prioritize their location in order to target me, and I managed to survive just by the skin of my teeth there. Now that I'd taken care of the runners, all I had to do was focus on this hunter, but the really hard part was being able to disable his flamethrower and take as minimal damage from his close-range melee attacks as possible. Utilizing a lot of the tricks that I have talked about in the past with how to deal with apocalypse machines was what got me through this combat scenario probably the best. Utilizing that close-range combat just to make sure that he was focusing on other attacks than his flamethrower and his mortar primarily. So it was at this point that I noticed that I still had one of his boob spots to shoot left. So after taking a couple pot shots at his mortar, doing a little bit extra damage on the weak point there, a couple more boob shots, and he was down. So it only took me about 11 minutes and 6 seconds, give or take. I timed this out primarily just by using the music that I was listening to at the point in time throughout the fight. But in the end, this fight was not too bad. So one of the big things that I learned when I was doing the Magnus challenge was that if you can time out your medkit usage properly, and you can bait out those kind of melee attacks, you can use the melee attacks against the tank, so to speak. So one of the big things that I was focusing on here was minimizing the amount of machine gun fire he was taking off at me, and minimizing his mortar use, and then at the same time trying to get his ticks to do a little bit of extra damage to him in the process while I was circling around. So it was all about kind of kiting the ticks to come towards the tank as they were doing a melee attack. With his tick pod taken care of, this tank was just clockwork at this point. Basically, again, trying to bait out those melee attacks and time my healing so that way I was resolving any sort of damage done by his melee attack. And then trying to peek out those weak points by constantly circle strafing him, and getting him to do his kind of slow turn animation. So I managed to pull off most of the damage against this guy by focusing on his mortar and focusing on his fuel tank on the back. Both of those are pretty easy to peek out and pretty easy to target, and will do a significant amount of damage against the Apocalypse tanks. There's a couple other parts on the tank that I maybe could have aimed for in the process to speed this up just a little bit, but in all honesty, I think for a first try, I did pretty solid figuring out what to primarily focus on with the Molar to kind of use its strengths, if it has any. So I was a little sloppy with trying to bait out those tank stomp attacks, and I wound up actually getting clipped by a few of them. But again, I was just trying to pull off those tank stomps so that way I would have enough time to get in behind the tank in order to shoot that fuel tank. Now, with the fuel tank down, I was kind of unsure of what to aim for next in order to do the most damage against this guy. I knew that I had chipped away at his knee joint and had done a significant amount of damage to the electrical box on his leg, but outside of that, I figured it would probably be smart to aim for the little cap on the top of his head and maybe try to peek out the battery on the back of him if I was able to. But for the most part, this tank was done at this point. He really didn't have anything that he could attack me with outside of that fire attack, and I got really good with my timing against those fire melee attacks and using health kits to kind of overwrite that fire hit. So now at this point, I figured, what the heck, let's rip off that faceplate and start doing some damage to the interior components on this tank. That might be a better course of action against this guy, because those components go down pretty dang easily. So after I was done taking out those internal components, again, I was pretty unsure of what to aim for next, so I kind of aimed for his head a little bit, down in between his machine gun and his mortar there, but I feel like the overall damage that I did from ripping off that mortar and doing the fuel cell damage primarily was what made this such a quick fight. Alright, so that was actually genuinely pretty easy, I'm not gonna lie. So no shade to the previous community member, but the other time that has been out for taking down an apocalypse tank using just the dilapidated molar was an hour and 21 minutes. And I was able to do that in just 11 minutes. That goes to show. That goes to show that your boy here has the tips and tricks and definitely has Generation Zero in his blood. So I think that if we ever get another incredibly strong enemy, say a new machine or a new machine variant, I'm definitely going to be trying to take on this guy with another kind of dilapidated molar challenge. But there you guys go. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching me shoot a tank with like 1,000 bullets. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Until then, peace.